Okay, so Judges chapter 2. Originally I thought about, making chapter 1 and chapter 2, make it all one section for the pew packers and then do one lesson because it's not that much to really dive into, but I'm glad I separated them out. They kept them distinctive for not only for the pew packers they're reading, but also to point out a few differences between the two chapters. When you read and look over chapter 1, does it seem like things are going well with Israel and the conquest of the land?
In the beginning?
In chapter 1, just chapter 1. You don't think so?
Well, they haven't taken all the land.
Yeah, it does talk about the places not conquered and all the people they did not drive out. But did Israel seem to mind?
That wasn't the point.
No. What did Israel seem to mind?
Israel? No,
Yeah.
God, yes.
Well, that's the point I'm going to get to. Israel didn't seem to mind. In their minds, they took the land. Did they drive everyone out? No. But did they control the land? Yes. They did control it.
Parts of it.
And I think they believe they accomplished that will of God. I almost see them patting themselves on the back. Everything's going well. The reason why I see that is the chapter 1 is a very physical, outward look at the situation. Whereas chapter 2 is a inward, spiritual look to the nation. Because as it opens up with the angel of the Lord coming. Doesn't just appear, he comes. And what does he say to him? What? Yeah, I like the rhetorical question he throws out there. But you have not obeyed me. What is this you have done? Just, again, it always plays so well into parents with children. You walk in and the kids are playing and the place is a wreck. There's mess. There's food everywhere. They seem happy as could be. What have you done? Do you expect an answer back? They better not answer. What is that question meant to do? Think. Look around and think. Have you done what you were supposed to do? Have you done it? His goal there is to get Israel to think about the situation. And he begins to lay it all out for them. And so he says, what have you done? Therefore I also said, I will not drive them out before you, but they will become as thorns in your sides, and their gods will be a snare to you. So now he's going to tell them, here's what's going to happen. And then later on he says, I'm going to leave them there, and they're going to be a test for you. And so it's an ongoing problem. Why did this happen? Why did Israel not simply do all that the Lord told them to do?
That numb and happy. That numb and happy. I've got crops I didn't plant. I'm harvesting.
You got grapes I didn't crash, right?
Life is good.
Oh, life is going real well. Uh-oh. What? You got something there, Larry?
No.
Oh. Oh, no worries. No, that's fine.
We were talking about chapter earlier, so.
Oh, okay. Or in chapter. Yes, Gary.
Well, you would think they would just individually and then collectively follow what they've been taught, right? You would think. But it seems like once a leader dies or leaves, one being Moses, then Joshua, and you can see that on through the rest of the Bible. Once someone who leaves, people fall away. Don't ask me why, but it seems to be the trend.
That is true, Gary. For those online, he was talking about how when you lose leaders like Moses or Joshua, it tends to make things somewhat fall apart. Now, Joshua is not dead yet, but he's about ready to die. He's about ready to pass on. Let's go all the way back. Oh.
One other thing is, they weren't actually doing it the way God wanted them to anyway, even when they were attacking them. Because what was it, towards the end, Judah said, hey, whichever brother it was, come help us run these people out. Not everybody, I'm just gonna ask you guys.
Yeah, and then, you help me and I'll help you. Because everyone was going through their own lands. And, there's a lot to be said on that as well. are they really doing everything they're supposed to be doing together? Because when some of the people are going to leave a few behind on the other side of the river, what did Moses think about that? You're going to stay over here while your brothers go and fight? I don't think so. And then they explained what was going on. They should all fight together. But that's another topic. I want us to go back to Egypt. And everything, and I know I don't mean to beat a dead horse for a cliche, but out of everything that generation saw in the land of Egypt, the plagues there, the crossing of the Red Sea, the great miracles, being there at the mountain and receiving the law, and the punishments and everything that happened, and yet they kept falling away, right? And they had Moses leading them. How much of that generation entered the promised land? 2. Caleb and Joshua.
And everyone under 12.
Well, yeah, well, that generation being of that age, but the children and the Caleb and Joshua, that was it. So the next generation, they go in and they begin to take the land. How much of that generation stays faithful to the Lord? Most of them. In fact, we see that. As we go through chapter 2, Joshua dies there, starting in chapter 6. He dismisses the people. It says in verse 7, the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, who had seen all the great work of the Lord which he had done for Israel. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110, and they buried him. And then verse 10, all that generation also were gathered to their fathers, and there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord, nor yet the work which he had done for Israel. One generation. And they fall away. And then we start bringing in the judges who don't judge. Remember, the judges don't judge all of Israel. They're whatever little pocket or area they are in. Maybe somebody would hear about them, or maybe usually probably like someone like Deborah, and they would come from far away. But generally, it was a small area. There would be multiple judges. There would be overlapping. We know that because of how many years the judges are. When you add them all up together, is too long for that time period. We know how much time should have passed because of Solomon's temple. He talks about how many years, was it 430 since they left Egypt, the building of the temple. So that you can't. They couldn't have all been one chronologically after another. They had to have some overlap there. But they were just little pockets all over Israel where they were judging at whatever time they may be. Now, when you open, talking about Shamgar, you got chapter 3, and Caleb, how many judges are in chapter 3? 3. How many of them were bad judges? None. None. And then as you go along, what do you start to notice about the judges? You come over here to Gideon, and he's a little unsure, right? But he does okay. He picks it up. But then at the end, when they ask him to be a king, he refuses. But what does he want? I'll take your gold ring, give him lots of money. And then he has his sons judge. And how good of judges were they? Not great. And then it all kind of falls apart not long after that. That's right. Well, the 71 survives, and then the other one was another from a concubine. But it doesn't end well. And then you keep going along, and the judges get worse and worse, don't they? One judge makes a silly comment about, first thing that comes out of my house, out of the door of my house, I will offer as a sacrifice to the Lord. And what was the first thing that came out of his house? His daughter. And we'll look at that when we get there. And then there's Samson. And then we move on beyond the book of Judges. Turn over to, did I write it down? Did I not write that down? 1 Samuel chapter 4. Look over there. Who is the high priest? Eli. What's that? Eli in chapter 4, look at verse 18. This is when He is going to find out his 2 sons died. And what did God tell Eli he wanted him to do about those 2 sons? Correct them. And did he? He did not. He would not do it. And so the Lord judged him on this. And it says, when he, this is the messenger, mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell off the seat backward beside the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died. For he was old and heavy. Thus he judged Israel 40 years. Was he a good judge? He was a good judge. How were his sons at judging? Bad. So who does that leave us as a judge?
From whom did he deliver? We don't have Philistines. It doesn't mention him delivering, which told us is what judging means. He didn't seem to deliver.
Well, no, not that we.
He said he judged. So I'm not saying he didn't. We're saying we don't know.
That's right. We don't know.
That part.
But he's also, he's not in the book of Judges in that sense, but true.
And if it was the Philistines, he did a really bad job at the end. So
Well, he was old and heavyset. And so, yeah. He was a figurehead. And his sons, he was raising his sons to take over almost like a dynasty. Now, so who's going to judge Israel now? Samuel. Yep, 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 1. And it came about when Samuel was old that he appointed his sons judges over Israel. So who appointed the judges? Who appointed the judges during the time of Eli? Eli did. In the book of Judges, who appointed the judges? God did. See the problem? Gideon appointed the judges, and it all went downhill, didn't it? So, the names of the firstborn was Joel, as the name of the second was Abijah, and they were judging in Beersheba. His sons, however, did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after dishonest gain and took bribes and perverted justice. And that's where we see in chapter 5 when the people say, give us a king to judge us. And I think it's the next chapter. Where is it? Oh, I thought it was here. Oh, it's chapter 7. Samuel, at the end of chapter 7, Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. And it goes on to say where he would go and how all the different places he judged. But then again, he was appointing his own sons to be the next judges. Is that what God wanted? It was not. We don't see anywhere in the text where he was told to do that. Yes?
Seems to me, though, that now these people, Eli and Samuel, are judging, not,
According to the law, and not necessarily
Samuel
leading.
went from place to place, so people must have come to him.
Yeah, he had different places he would judge, and eventually he would land home. That's the end of chapter 7, as he would make a circuit, giving judgment and leading the people in that way. And I think Eli and Samuel were delivering people, but not from a physical problem, but from spiritual problems, as they ought to. There were no needed deliverances from the sense of being in captivity. There were some scuffles and whatnot, and armies would be put together and sent out. But as we saw and see in chapter 8, eventually that got to the point where they wanted a king. But and I think God always wanted Israel to have a king. That's what he wanted. But what was the motivation behind that? Why did Israel want a king? Yeah, because we want to look like all the surrounding nations. That's the wrong motivation. That's the wrong reasoning there. And so back over here to the book of Judges, we're working through this, and you kind of get this verses 16 and following. We get a synopsis of how the whole book of Judges is going to work out. The Lord raised up judges who delivered them from the hands of those who plundered them, yet they did not listen to their judges. For they played the harlot after other gods and bowed themselves down to them. They turned aside quickly from the way in which their fathers had walked in obeying the commandments of the Lord. They did not do as their fathers. When the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge and delivered them from the hand of their enemies. all the days of the judge. For the Lord was moved to pity by their groaning, because those who oppressed and afflicted them. But it came about, when the judge died, that they would turn back and act more corruptly than their fathers, in following other gods to serve them and bow down to them. So, after each judge, they would act more corruptly. So, as that corruption kept spreading and growing in the minds and hearts of people, what kind of people were being picked up as judges? You can start seeing that creeping in to the judges as well, and into their family. And so you had this ongoing problem. But then we get over to 1 Samuel, and they get a king. Saul, as we already mentioned before, good king. In the beginning, he was a good king. But corruption came in. And remember what God said when the people said they wanted a king like all the other nations? What did God tell them a king would do? And their children. And save them. It's going to take your crops. They're going to take your livestock. He's going to do all these things. I do not think that's the kind of king God wanted to give them, but that is the king they asked for, right? Because isn't that how the other kings and the other nations acted? So that's what they got. David, good king or bad king? Okay, how many civil wars did he create? How many problems did he create, huh? Yeah, how many problems did he? Tons of problems. Still a good king. Solomon, good king, bad king. As far as Israel goes, fantastic. I mean, did anything really go bad or wrong for them under his reign? Spiritually, got some problems there. And then his sons, they started to rule and all downhill. They split the country into half. And you got the northern kingdom, you got the southern kingdom. How many good kings came out of the northern kingdom? How many good kings came out of the southern kingdom? Not many. All the way up to the point where it was just always bad, and God sent them off into captivity. And then when in that captivity, God kept them there until they lost all hope, and they turned back to him, and he brought them back to the land. And you may remember after we did a study on the book of Daniel, if you were in that class, we were also looking at the intertestamental period during the Maccabees. What were the high priests like during the Maccabean revolt? You remember? It was all politics, where you had one guy who was not even a Levite supplanting the current high priest so he could be in charge when Epiphanes was coming in and trying to control things there. And then while Epiphanes was gone battling other people, the actual high priest gathered up his own army and tried to kill that guy to retake that high priest position. And then Epiphanes came in and established his own high priest. And then, of course, the Romans did the same thing. How are things going spiritually for Israel? Poorly. And then comes the Gospels. Jesus comes. He establishes the church. What is it that God did for us in the church to help bring a check to corruption? He gave us a king. And just in case someone decided they weren't going to follow it anymore, each congregation was autonomous from the others. We all stand on our own. So if corruption entered one, it does not affect the other, right? Is there corruption among congregations in the world today? Would you say there's a lot? Well, we don't know how it's always been, but it seems like it's not going great. Why? Why does it happen? When we look at the book of Judges, I think we can see why. Why was corruption such a big problem in the book of Judges? What's that? That's right. It's the heart. Chapter 1, all about Israel, and I think it was the outward. Chapter 2 gives us the snapshot. Here's what's going on in the book of Judges, but he's looking at their reasoning, their hearts. What have you done? Have you obeyed me? Have you, though? every time a judge would come along and deliver them, they would go well, the judge would die, and then what would happen? Right back to the corruption. They were changing on the outside, but they were not changing on the inside. Remember what God said through his prophet Jeremiah about what was to come? About the heart. I'm going to write my word on my law on their hearts. And no longer will they say, know your God. What did he mean by that? With the Jews, how did you come into a relationship with God? You were born into it. And then when you got older, they would say, all right, you're a Jew. You have a relationship with God. Know God. And then they would teach you. So what was Jeremiah looking to? The Christian age. You will already know God. It will be written on your heart. You're going to choose to follow him. You see the difference? So what can we do today? Because there is corruption, no doubt. What can we do to curb corruption? What do you do in the kitchen if you want to curb corruption on meat? Don't say put it in the refrigerator, Jim.
Okay. I was going to say
Cook
freeze
it.
it, so there.
Freeze it. What would they do back in the times of Christ? Put a little salt on it. You salt it. And salt would preserve the meat, would it not? It'd be really salty. But that's what it does. So what was the application that Jesus was wanting us to see there about us being salt? How do we curb corruption? With salt, spiritually. Huh? Be examples.
Persevering.
Okay, yeah, persevering through difficult times. But what is that salt, though? What is that salt? Okay, it purifies the heart, but it's God's word, isn't it? Isn't that what we're partaking and bringing in and learning? When we're going through the fruit of the Spirit, we're going to, hopefully this Sunday, we'll look at Romans chapter 12. After that, I want us to do a series to end out the year of resisting Satan, looking at different aspects on curbing that, being that salt, and you need those things. Those things and that fruit in order to have that shield, that putting on that full armor of God to be ready, standing firm. The Israelites in the book of Judges, it's there to show us they were not ready. The previous generation, or the one that came out of Egypt, they were just not ready. God gave them every opportunity, but they were never ready. What was the problem? It was their heart. Well, everything on the outside they were probably doing it in many ways the right way, but it was never on their heart. And each subsequent generation struggled with that. And I wonder if that's why, when you come to David, King David, that's why God said, a man after my own heart. I think he wanted to impress something upon the Israelites about that. I'm looking for something here. Look at David. He's a man after my own heart. I want you to change from the inside out. Always. Paul brings that up from Romans chapter 1. Faith to faith. Man lives by faith. And he was quoting from Habakkuk. That's what he was looking for. But it is by faith. That's what Jim was saying earlier about why this happened, because they had everything they needed. Why did they need to do anything? Go ahead. Let me say, I do agree with that in the king that they were asking for. But I believe that when we ask for things as Christians, God will sometimes tell us yes or no. Or I think a lot of times is, I'm going to answer your prayer, but not with what you want. Right. Because you really need it like this. I ask for patience, for example, and I want to get patience the easy way. And I always end up getting it the hard way, where I'm put into a situation where I have to learn patience. But I see what you're saying, and that is true, that we got to be more careful and more specific about what we're asking for. A lot of times we don't know, and I think that's what Paul's talking about in Romans chapter 8, about the groanings too deep for words. I think those groanings are not the third person of the Godhead, as some say. I think it's our spirit, where we're praying and we don't know what to ask for. We're not sure, but we're in agony or whatever it might be, and so there's a groaning within us, but God knows, and he answers or sees through that prayer. And I always use the illustration, it's a negative illustration, but I remember this kid who was okay. He survived with only a few bruises. He got hit by a truck. We were out playing in the snow and ice, and we were throwing snowballs, and he was running across the road as this truck came, hit his brakes, slid on the ice, and I saw that truck hit that kid. And he must have gone like, of course, I was a kid, so it probably was only like 5 feet, but it looked like 20 feet to me, and then it rolled over top of him. And that guy jumped out of that truck, I mean, screaming. He looked up at heaven. He looked back under the truck. He was screaming. I was just standing there stunned. And just, I remember as a kid thinking, why was he screaming? Why was he making all those noises? What can you say? He just hit a kid with his truck. It was groanings too deep for words. And God hears those, doesn't he? He knows. He knows what we need. Sometimes it comes in a way where, not the way we want to receive it, but just like with the Israelites. Well, okay, you want to act that way? I'm going to have the Philistines take you into captivity for a little bit. Here comes the Midianite. I'm going to have them plunder your town. And all these troubles. It's going to be a snare to you, or it can be a test to you. Did you notice that that's into both ways? In one way, it's a thorn to them in their side, and the other way is going to be a test. Remember when we talked about that? What is it? Is it a test or is it a thorn? How do you determine which one it is? Do you remember?
Successful or not.
Huh?
You come through it well.
Well, no, you determine on the way you look at it. If you look at it like a test, it's a test. If you look at it like a thorn in the side, it's going to be a thorn in the side. You know the difference. What's the thorn in the side? What's that? Pain. Pain. So something you do not want, and it does not help you in any way until you can just get rid of it. What is a test? Something to prove where you're at, where you're deficient, and how you can grow. If you're willing to look. That's what he's saying. And that's why he let that. I'm going to leave him here for a test or thorn. Your choice. And we know what choices they picked. What was it for them? Thorn aside. Thorn aside. Almost always. That's there for us. It's the same for us today. And so the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what are we going to do about the corruption? Ask, seek, and knock. And sometimes that answer may not be what we want, but it may be what we need. But for us, in our part, individually, be salt and be light. Keep bringing the Word of God into our hearts and make a change here. That's the first place. And we can continue to be a light. And if enough of us are a light at North Valley, then a city set on a hill cannot be hidden. And people will see it, and they will come and flock to it. That's the lesson I see in chapters 1 and 2 of the book of Judges. And I think that's the lesson he wants us to see through the whole book as we begin to go through each judge all the way through. And we're going to look at chapter 3 next week. Read over it. Take a look at those first 3 judges, and we're going to keep track of watching these judges, and we're going to see this corruption ease its way in all the way till we get to Eli and to Samuel. And even their sons. You would think the sons, but at least be something. And that's something else that we'll be taking a look as we work through it.